Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this Uncaged episode with Anwar Mafille and
Moazzam Begg.
Today we are reflecting on this show on ITV by Ross Kemp, where he's actually going into Belmarsh and seeing what's happening in there. He said that he spent a night in cell and was left shaken. So you spent 7 months in there. Let's go a little bit into the history of this infamous prison.
Yeah, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. HMP Belmarsh was opened in 1991, I believe, on a place that actually was on a marsh. And it was built as a high security prison, maximum security prison. And it is the only prison in the country that has a prison within a prison, known as the famous or the infamous high security unit. Now, the time when I was there, I was a Category A prisoner, and it is a Category A prison generally, meaning that there are extra security checks, that you are supposed to be held in a cell by yourself. The reality of the prison is that it is a mixture of all sorts of people that are held on remand. So people can be held on remand for 2, 3, 4 years in some cases, or where there's been trials and mistrials and retrials and so forth, and other cases where there are people who are sort of facing other trials after their own trials while they're in prison. The prisoners that I came across included mass murderers, or people who'd killed more than 2 or 3 people, people who were from gangs, gangland killers, drug dealers, serious drug dealers, and of course those who've been convicted of terrorism and are serving huge sentences. I was held in a cell when I first came, and on both sides of me were 2 prisoners serving 38 years each for gangland killings. So they say it's the most secure prison in the United Kingdom, that I believe nobody's escaped from it, but it is designed to be the most high security prison in the UK, and that is where all central kind of cases based in Woolwich, people who go to Woolwich Crown Court or to the Old Bailey, then are processed through Belmarsh. So
reason why that Belmarsh is so infamous is because it was once called the British Guantanamo. Reason being that he held prisoners for years without charge and trial, just like you were detained without charge and trial while you were in Guantanamo. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I remember when I returned from Guantanamo, actually, some of the brothers phoned me who'd been detained without charge or trial under these anti-terror legislations, which were ruled by the British the House of Lords to be unconstitutional. And they said to me, brother, please don't forget Britain's own Guantanamo, that we are also being held without charge or trial. So of course, Cage's work, as you know, has involved and spoken about numerous people who've been held in Belmarsh, some who've been on remand, some convicted, but others who never even faced a day in court.
So actually I remember at the time we did receive letters from those brothers that were detained without charge or trial, and sending a letter that, thanking the world and they had no connection to the world whatsoever beside their lawyers. And actually some of them had not seen anyone or any visitor for 3 years except their lawyer, no contact with family.
So one of the things that happens in Belmarsh, especially now with the high security unit, again, I'd never been in there, but I've spoken to several people who've been inside there, and that is, as I said, a prison within a prison that isolates you from the rest of the other prisoners. And that isolation is almost complete when you're accused of terrorism, as some of these guys had been, but they had not, in their case, they'd not been charged. So the fact that they weren't getting visits, the fact that they were completely isolated from other prisoners, that their mail was completely monitored if they got any. So those are just some of the things, of course, that we also experienced in Guantanamo. But there are marked differences, and I'll tell you about those in a moment.
So Ross Kemp spent a day or a few days over there. Tell us about what was the daily life over there for you as a prisoner.
Yeah, I remember. So when they took me to Woolwich Marylebone, Westminster Crown Court, and then from there, Magistrates Court, and then from there they whisked me off to Belmarsh, and the police officers told me this is a really tough prison. The only interaction I've ever had with Belmarsh before that was speaking to people on the phone or visiting Long Lartin. So the security checks were so tight that even the police had to be fully checked, and the car had to be checked, the police car that was taking me in. And then eventually when they took me to processing, they take my name and details and stuff, I thought, okay, they're going to strip search me, but there wasn't a complete strip search. There was a partial one. Then I thought that somebody's going to shackle me, but there were no shackles. And then I thought, you know, there's going to be guards on either side walking along me, but this guard walked about 10 paces in front of me, and I thought, this isn't my experience of prison. And then eventually the first interaction I had with people who I thought were prison guards, or at least working in the prison, was a couple of brothers. They said, "Salaam alaikum, Moazzam, we heard what happened to you," and so forth. And they're walking along, and I said, "Alaikum salam, are you guys, do you work here?" They said, no, we're prisoners, we're just on our way to the gym." I said, "You guys have a gym here?" I said, yeah, we've just come from making phone calls. I said, "You've been making phone calls? You have phone calls here?" So all of the things that I'd kind of been used to in in Guantanamo, I found that in Belmarsh, you know, those who wanted to have a TV in the cell, you have a canteen sheet where you can order up to 400 items if you've got the money in your account to do so. You have the ability to make phone calls, you get visits. As a Category A prisoner, you have to wear an orange bib, which is different to the yellow ones of the other prisoners, but you do get to have visits, touch visits, and they're monitored, but nonetheless, you can have family visiting. So I was trying to think of my experience of Guantanamo and compare it to this, and I couldn't. I couldn't compare it to the brutality, to the isolation, to the separation from the rest of the world. And every day there was something to do. You could walk out on the yard, walk with other prisoners, and I met with prisoners from all over the country who'd come for various things. And had it not been for the fact that they're trying to prosecute me and put me away for 15 years, I didn't find it very difficult at all, unlike some people in Ross Kemp's program. Like Tommy Robinson. So you obviously saw, you know, Tommy Robinson is put into, I think, the healthcare unit and separated for his own good. And he complains to Ross Kemp how he's in solitary confinement. And it's not really solitary confinement in the sense of you're cut off from everything. Ross Kemp points out that he's got a TV, he's got all the stuff that he needs. And in all honesty, if you were to spend time in prison, you want nothing more than your own cell, because sharing it with other people, where you have to share the toilet and all of the smells and the noises and the idiosyncrasies of people, that's the last thing you want as a person who values privacy. So it seems that Belmarsh is that big beast with a range of experience depending on your treatment and who you are as a prisoner, from all the way from being 3 men in one cell living in difficult conditions, all the way up to being extremely isolated, and as we've seen in the past, being held without charge or trial. Yes. I have a question is about, what would you say, we see, especially in the show, we see some people completely broken, coming from broken background and finding it very difficult to get their life together. Yeah. What would you say is the effect of prison, and is there any sort of rehabilitation in the British prison system? Well, you know, you've got to think about this, right? A lot of the prisoners, I'd say the majority of the prisoners are reoffenders in my experience, and they're not in there for kind of quote unquote political crimes, rather they're there for petty crimes, and they are funding a lifestyle in a sense. Drugs is a big thing in and out of prison. And to get out of that, you need your social conditions outside changed for you to change inside. And for some people, it's a home to come to. It's a roof over the head. It's 3 square meals a day. It's a room, and you can get to go to the workshops. You can go to the gym. You can go to different classes they have for education, for example. So for some people, it's kind of a way out. I just don't know to what extent it's working, because the turnover is very high. The prisons are overcrowded. The numbers, 3 to a cell in a place where there's supposed to be maximum 2. I've heard that there are in some cases 4 to a cell, which is just unbelievable in a tiny cell like that. So what would you say is, for people, what would you say is the one takeaway when it comes to Belmarsh? Well, I think there's many takeaways from Belmarsh. Obviously, you know, nobody would wish prison upon anybody else. In my comparison of prisons where I've been, Guantanamo, Bagram, Kandahar and so forth, there is no comparison. I can't compare it. But for Britain, it's a place, I think more than anything else, it makes you think of the broken lives that exist, whether people deserve it because they've committed crimes, or whether they don't because they've been convicted for something they didn't do, or they're held on a remand, or they're held without charge like the previous prisoners we mentioned. It is clearly a place that it breaks lives, and I don't know what the evidence is to say that it has helped to rehabilitate and stop people. As a Muslim, of course, I would say this, that we use our time, I use my time at least, to learn Quran, to read books, to study myself. I even had a laptop that they gave me because my case involved like electronic stuff. The laptop was so heavy because they put a big metal plastic jacket on it. It was so heavy that I used to use the bag to do curls in my cell. So whatever I could do to benefit myself, I would do that. And I think that whoever goes to prison in that, at least try to, as Malcolm X famously said, that in prison, if you wish, and as he did, you can change your life.
One thing that one brother that was once detained in Bagram prison, again, like a torturous condition, told me, and we're talking about the different type of prisons and how some are easier than others, and he told me, you know, Anwar, even if you were, prison is prison, even if you were detained in Buckingham Palace, at some point you will still feel missing your family and deprived of your basic liberty.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important point for any prison, but you have to detach yourself from being a family person, you know. If you start, you write letters, of course, and then over a period of time, and I saw this with the longer term prisons, I couldn't but help feel sympathy towards these longer term prisoners who'd made ridiculous, terrible mistakes, or crimes, in fact, that they'd committed, some of them very serious, as teenagers, but they're paying for it for the rest of their lives. As an example, I saw two young Muslim boys, they'd gone to, as part of a gang hit to go and kill somebody from another gang on one of these main roads in London. One of them had a shotgun, the other one had a Mac-10, which is a very powerful handheld machine gun. He opened fire because it was so powerful, he was unable to control it. And instead of shooting whoever he wanted to shoot, he missed them completely and he shot two innocent girls at a bus stop. Both of these two kids got 38 years, minimum sentence. So you think to yourself, why? You destroyed people's lives and you destroyed your own. And I think for me, those types of examples of people is something that I can never forget.
And is there any positive experience that you could say that you had in Belmarsh? Personal experience, spiritual?
Yeah, of course. Well, I say a funny experience. There's one prisoner who came, and he was on what's known as a TPIM, or an extension of a control order, which was the certain conditions that are placed upon him under the terrorism provisions, that he can't go to certain places or do certain things. If he breaches that, then he gets into prison. So he came to prison, but remember, this guy, he's not charged with a crime, he's not convicted with one. He comes out and he buys, part of the conditions against him is he can't have any access to the internet. He doesn't have access to the internet, but he buys a TV for his children. The TV is a smart TV, and it has internet facilities. So they find out that he's bought a TV, an internet-ready TV. They rearrest him, bring him back into Belmarsh. So the same guy, we say goodbye to him one day, he comes back in the next couple of days. And we laughed at him, we said to him for a joke, one of the prisoners said, next time make sure you buy a stupid TV instead of a smart TV.
So that's, in summary, that's Belmarsh between gangland murders and buying a stupid TV. Yeah. That's all we have time for, and we'll see you for next episode, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum.